I'm from Los Angeles originally, raised in a Jewish middle-class family, and became interested in altered states of consciousness in college, both through exposure to Eastern meditation techniques and psychedelic drugs, and believed there must be some common biological denominator where those two sets of experiences overlap, the visions, the voices, the extreme emotional states, and began focusing on the pineal gland, which has got a long revered esoteric physiological history as the anatomical location on top of the center of the head for the highest possible spiritual types of experiences. The motivation for my study was to establish the biological bases of spiritual experience. I believe that if giving DMT replicated features of non-drug altered states, especially religious and spiritual ones, one can make an argument that increased amounts of DMT in the body occurring naturally was behind those non-drug spiritual states like enlightenment, near-death states, effects of meditation. We gave a lot of DMT. We studied almost 5 dozen individuals. They were all normal volunteers. They weren't people with mental problems. They weren't, terminally ill. These experiences were the most, powerful, psychedelic effects in the volunteers' lives. They established a new, benchmark of the psychedelic state. But at the same time, they weren't, necessarily religious or spiritual in their nature. They were more an amplification of who the people were in the first place. Their pre-existing personalities, their goals, their more or less, conscious beliefs. So it was more the case that beliefs that people were already holding or hopes that they had been carrying were firmed up, made true, realized, became, rather than just an opinion or a hunch, they became the truth, they became a fact. So after a few years of those kinds of trips, it became clear that there wasn't any inherent spiritual qualities to the substance itself. It more depended on the person and what they brought to the experience. So I think that's where the religious use of ayahuasca is so key, I believe, because I think in the case of DMT specifically, but psychedelics more generally, you need to prepare the soil, as it were, and you need to maintain the growth that occurs gradually in the context of wanting to become a better person with the aid of psychedelic DMT, ayahuasca. So that's why I think the material or the things that you put into your mind before you take the drug are as important or even more important than the drug itself. If your goals are to become a better person, to do your part for world peace, then you need to already be working on those things, which are then firmed up, made more real, become your truth in a way that wasn't the case before, under the influence of properly supervised psychedelic experience, like can take place in the religious settings and uses of ayahuasca. I think that the book establishes a context for the renewal of human research. One of the important things that I do in the book is I lay out on a history of clinical research with psychedelics, both in the U.S. and abroad. And I do speculate a bit, toward the end of the DMT book, I make some predictions that people will discover DMT in the pineal gland, which occurred 13 years later. We now know that DMT occurs in the mammalian pineal gland. And I also speculate about potential increases of brain levels of DMT in the dying person. To the extent that the near-death state resembles the DMT effect, that would support the idea that there is more DMT around at the time of your death. I think there's going to be increasing interest in DMT because of its presence in the human body and the keen interest that scientists are taking in what it's doing in the human body. It seems to be required for normal brain function because it's transported into the brain using energy, which is an unusual effect or an unusual trait of the substance. And I think with the increasing use of ayahuasca, people are going to want to know, what is it doing? What's the best, way to employ ayahuasca, both in religious and clinical settings, wellness, contexts, creativity, end-of-life care, those kinds of things. So the more that people know about DMT, both by itself and in its use as one of the main compounds in ayahuasca, the more people will understand how to use it effectively.